So welcome to the Node.js Community Build Working Group meeting for the 12th of March 2019. We had agreed to make the focus of this session looking at the different elements that we control access to in the Build Working Group and seeing how we could break that down. There has been some discussion, though, that we should start out with at least a short discussion on platforms, versions, and stuff like that for Node 12, since that's timely. So we'll start with that, and if we have time, we'll switch back to the other issue. That's as opposed to following our regular agenda, which we agreed we'd sort of skip for this week. So Rod, I think you'd mentioned, or I'm not sure if maybe it was Richard who'd mentioned that we should look at this, and you'd sort of echoed. Do you want to kick off the discussion on the platforms and versions?
Yeah. So I'm just setting up a Google Doc.
Okay.
I might give you the link. I can't screen share in this webinar, but I can give you the link.
Sure.
And you can. Where's the chat? Can we chat in here? I don't even know if we can chat.
Yeah, there's a chat. It's there's a chat bubble.
Oh, there it is. I'm going to expand the window. There's that. I've made it publicly readable for now.
So share, there we go. Okay, it's shared.
I'm not even sure how to do this, actually.
Yeah, because our existing table actually shows, maybe it's worth bringing that up because it shows, so github.com.
I think it's in building.md, isn't it?
Yes, you're right. It's under Node.
So it's in Node.js Node.
Yep. Okay. Oops, and that did not. The suggestion it gave me was not what we wanted. So building.md, right? So this is what we have.
Right. So this, we have to be careful with we got two things here. We've got what we officially support, which is basically what we will run tests for.
Yep.
And then what we build on. So there's two things we've got to look at. What's the minimum support for each of these things?
Yep.
So, so how about I copy that then? System.
Yeah, there is some linkage between those two, but they are in fact different.
I don't like this table. I'm going to do system architecture and then support. I think maybe we should redo this this table. I don't like the kernel version being in there for a start. Anyway,
I think though that's what actually matters to people, right?
It's the libc that matters the most. Or
maybe it's the glibc. Is it only the glibc?
Yeah, because they're usually tied to kernel, so.
Yeah, the glibc definitely is important. I mean, that's the one where there's symbols that if you don't have them, you won't be happy.
Yeah. Okay, so in my spreadsheet, I'm going to copy Linux x64, Linux x86. I'm gonna just list them this way first.
Sure.
64. Oops. MV7 and MV6. So we've also got Linux on the IBM platforms. So that is S390X. What other Linux?
It's S390X, PPC64LE. And it's got to be like there's the two Linuxes and then an AIX.
And that's just for PPC LE. Is BE dropped or?
BE was dropped in, I think it was 8. I'd have to go back and look at the list to be absolute.
Right. Okay.
But I believe that BE, like we don't build it on the current versions.
Okay, so let's go. The next top one is Windows.
So let me just go back. I'm sharing your yes. Okay.
x86, and then we got Mac Mac OS.
Right.
And that's x64. I'm going to list that because x86 is old enough now. AIX
Yep.
on PPC 64 LE.
It's PPC BE.
BE for AIX.
64BE, exactly, yeah.
And let me go to building OMD.
Here, yeah, I don't know. There, I can. That's what's being shown right now, if that helps.
Yeah, I've got your screen on one side of mine, and
Okay.
That's all right. I'm loading building.md
Okay.
myself now. And the other thing that's important to look at is actually the version selector script in Jenkins. We should highlight that for anyone that's listening in to see what that's the status of our test and release infrastructure.
Right. Yep.
And I might give you a link to that so you can click on it if you don't have it handy.
I think related to is the compiler level for 12.
Yeah.
There is an issue where that's being discussed. So
now, one thing I don't know the status of, and I think I tried to query, but V8 has been putting pressure on our GCC, but I don't know what the status of that, and are they going to be pushing for anything in 7.4, 7.5, and 7.6 V8?
So my understanding was C++ 14 they were pushing for. We could dig up the issue. Actually, we can dig up the issue. My understanding is that C++ 14 should be enough for those, and that's covered by GCC 6.
Oh, Raphael's in here. Welcome, Raphael.
Oh, sorry. Should I promote people? Yeah.
Raphael will be very handy on this discussion. I think he keeps more of this stuff in his head at the moment than we do.
Yeah. Well, I've been keeping. I mean, I have on that one. I've been tracking the discussion because we need to get ready to upgrade our machines with the right compilers, and we're starting to look at that. In terms of GCC, there was, I think it was SmartOS doesn't have GCC 8, which is one of the suggestions, and IBMI only has up to 6.3.
Oh, wow.
So if we do update, my suggestion is we go to 6.3 and no higher.
So just to clear it up, so we are already at C++ 14. What V8 want is C++ 17, which GCC 6 is pretty good at. But C++ 20 was just signed and canonized, and we can get that with the GCC 8 or VM 8, so Clang 8, which is possible to build for IBMI, SmartOS, AIX, and Linux.
The comment from our IBMI lead was that 6.3 was the highest that could be reasonable.
With GCC. So for Clang, it should be able to compile it because that's what V8 is doing.
But not on those platforms.
V8 is they are compiling like tip of their own subversion, so tip of the repo of Clang for their CI.
So I mean, I could understand you might be able to build it, but I don't think forcing everybody to have to build a compiler from scratch.
So again, we have like two. They're a little bit orthogonal issues. One is what do we test with, and the other is what do we build with.
Yeah.
So there are many benefits to building with the latest compiler which includes the latest optimizer, and which can pick like there's certain if-defs inside the code to use better, code paths. We could keep building, testing with the most commonly or like the most recent and decent available compilers, and in that sense. And
so I'm not quite following what would be the proposal in that.
So the proposal is to have like a set of shiny new amazing compilers for release, but keeping support with the default.
Yeah, as long as we get libc compatibility, I'm fine with that too.
So yeah, Clang are totally native glibc compliant, and GCC the build tools for Ubuntu and the DevToolkit for CentOS, etc., work very hard to be ABI compatible.
Right. So I guess if I understand correctly, the minimum compiler required might be something lower, but we would then build releases on some platforms at least with a newer compiler.
Yeah. And that will allow us to at least, not get stuck with the situation that we are now. Like we're building with 4.8, which is an ancient compiler. So get how do you say, align ourselves with, it's not even state of the art because there's like Clang 9 in the pipeline and GCC 9. So with Clang 8, C++ 20, get ourselves situated for release and try to keep support for things like GCC 6.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. That makes sense to me. I think that's what that would mean, though, is in test we would have to test both GCC 6.3 and the newer one.
Yeah, we already do that with for Linux we do that. We do that for ARM. We do that for.
Do we do that for Linux? Do we, what different compilers do we test? I know we test on different distributions.
We test 4.9 and we test 6.
Okay.
At least, and I think there's a platform with 7.
Right. Yeah, I mean, my main concern is that we don't push the minimum to the point where we can't do that on some platforms, and that we test it well enough so that it's, we're not using, say, 6 only for, a subset of the platforms, but we actually test on all of them. So it's basically, needed. It ensures we'll continue to run on that level. Then if we want to make the release ones something higher, that doesn't seem like a bad idea.
Yeah.
As long as as we end up with the compatibility, because I don't think that's also true on all platforms either.
It definitely requires testing. The last time, when I opened the issue, probably over a month ago, I ran some very preliminary feasibility tests on. We didn't have IBM I then, but I did on a couple of IBM platforms, on a couple of Linux platforms, even Windows, and everything seemed to be working. So
yeah, I think Smartos said they didn't have 8, but I mean,
no,
regardless.
not GCC. I was Smartos. I was using Clang.
Right. Okay. Using Clang. Okay.
So just as a feasibility. So I'm saying if we set our if we make this the best case scenario goal, and try to get there, and
Yep.
then if we can't, then we won't. But like the main motivation here is to push ourselves a little bit now, so we don't have to get stuck with like Asian compilers in 2 years.
Right. Now, in theory, if we don't think that it affects things, we should be able to even change that inside of 12, what we actually build the releases with. Is that?
So we haven't done that before, as far as
No,
I
I know
know.
that's true. Yeah, that's
Here-
maybe we don't want to.
So theoretically, it's the compilers are trying to make that guarantee. So I
Yeah.
know that Microsoft and Windows have officially declared that Visual Studio 2019 will be ABI compatible with 2015. So even like partial libs and then object files could be relinked. But they are working really, really hard to maintain that.
Right. So I think I'm understanding the proposal that would be like our options are leave 494 as the minimum level, move up to something like 6.3 as the minimum level, or push for something higher. It sounds like what you might be suggesting is like we'd move the minimum level to 6.3-ish, but then in our release machines actually look to build with something newer if we could.
Yeah.
And but in if we had to, we'd build on 6.3 or whatever and release. If we can have something that's higher that's compatible, we would use that.
Yeah.
I guess in terms of sticking with 494 for 12, is that an option? Do we think that's reasonable?
I think that would be only if everything else fails, because it's a really old compiler. It's not fully. It's like it's C++ 14 minus a few caveats.
Right.
It's a very old optimizer. It generates suboptimal binaries.
Right.
And it will, and like V8 will like in a year, they'll want to strangle.
Right. Rod, what's your take on that?
A year. So the question is, how long are we going to be accepting V8 upgrades in Node 12? So during the current period, we can expect that. Then beyond current, so that's 6 months from now, essentially. But then how much into LTS are we going to want to upgrade V8? And what I can't remember how long we did that for in Node 10.
I don't think it's quite
stretched.
I think people would argue that if there'll also be pressure just in terms of backport for security fixes and stuff, even if it's not a wholesale upgrade.
Right, but then does that impact compiler? How much does that impact compiler?
Yeah, if they've moved up to a newer compiler and the code that you're trying to backport doesn't run,
then yeah, you start fiddling it with it and you lose.
So here's
the security invariant.
Here's the other concern that we can't lose sight of, which is that there are people out there, there are lots of people out there that build this themselves. And for the platforms that we don't officially support in our binaries, they will build it themselves. So on the one hand, we've got pressure to upgrade C++ level and better compilers. On the other hand, we do have a big user community supporting old platforms that legitimately they have trouble upgrading. There's legitimate reasons to be running older architectures. And so we're stuck trading off between those two sides.
That's a good question. But
do
the people that build nodes, are they beyond building the Clang toolset? Because that like what happened with MIPS. If V8 is pressing from downstream, then we can hold that off for just so long.
The fact that V8 ship Clang themselves in their repos talks about the difficulty of that whole tool chain. It's not as simple as saying, oh yeah, just grab Clang this minimum version and compile it. It's really not a trivial process. I mean, compiling a compiler is not particularly fun, particularly
just saying,
on,
Clang is
particularly on systems that are resource constrained.
I've played with that it's way better than the GCC tool set.
Yes, but we're also talking about likely constrained systems here. So we face this problem on ARM, is that you don't want to build a compiler on ARM. So let's not lose sight of that user base in this process. I'm pushing towards newer stuff, and I understand the pressure from V8, although I don't agree with it. I think they need to just hold up a bit. But let's accept that we've got dual pressures here, so let's not gallop forward too much. Now, if you look at some of the life cycles, I'll for instance, so I've put in the top one there in Linux x64. I've put in some proposed example minimum distros that we would support, and then the EOLs for them. Now,
can you give me editability to that?
Oh, didn't I do that? Oh, can edit. Anyone can edit. Save. Okay, you may need to reload.
Okay, yeah, I can do that.
Now, CentOS 6 is going to be EOL'd in 2020. Oh, no, the interesting one, I think, actually is Debian. So Debian is EOL in 2020. So do we, and CentOS, I guess CentOS 6. Refat, you've already put in a pull request that's been merged to stop even testing on CentOS 6. So that by that same metric, we would stop testing Node 12 on Debian 8 and only ship binaries on Debian 9. But these people running these operating systems have got a year and a bit of legitimate support from their end coming in, but then binaries from Node.js.org that probably won't run on their systems. So, that's just a cost that you pay by pushing your usage of these systems to the end, because like Debian 8's been out since 2015 and CentOS 6 is 2011, but there are legitimate reasons to be stuck on these things. So we're the ones applying pressure to upgrade.
Yeah, but again, we're not without grading to experimental. So we are accepting community patches and community builds. Again, which is what, if anybody from the Internet Archive is watching, I'm sorry, like what's happening with Linux 86 and the Internet Archive. Like they want to do community effort and community build. So that's out there. It's a possibility. And for instance, we've dropped Linux 86 compatibility, but the code hasn't broken, and it's over a year that we haven't tested or shipped 86 binaries, and then the code works. So it's a trade-off. It's not that we're like really cutting, all ties with those platforms.
Yes, but stopping binaries is a big deal for all of them.
Like, yeah, I know it is. Wow. Again, for Linux 86, it took almost a year until somebody really said, like, you're breaking my workflow, let's do something about it. As opposed to what happened with ARM v6, like we got the feedback really soon, really fast.
We went fishing for that. We did.
Yeah, we went fishing. We went fishing for Linux 86. We tried very hard at the time to get some feedback. We talked with our distribution channel. So I'm saying I don't know if we can extrapolate from one platform. Like I have no idea what's going in like the Debian like ecosystem. I know, Ubuntu, I have a pretty good and of what's going on and Raspbian, but like I have no idea who uses Debian these days and where do they communicate, and I haven't been aware of any Debian explicit work being done.
So Michael, you just put Ubuntu 14.04 for PPCLE Linux as release. So this is what we're compiling on?
This is what we currently have. My goal is to try and get, I have some CentOS 7.6 machines now that those are available at OSU, but getting lined up to get those configured and building is going to take some time. So first I want to get the compilers to whatever level they need to be so we can continue to build, and then we'll work on moving over to CentOS 7.6. That shouldn't affect the binaries in terms of it actually. CentOS 7.6 has an earlier glibc than Ubuntu 14 does.
One of the other variables that we're tuning when we turn this dial of OS level is our support burden as well, which is one of the other factors that we're subconsciously, I think, putting in here now. But we're thinking 3.5 years down the track. We're still going to be supporting these platforms. Do we think we're going to have the manpower to do that? And are we going to be around, and all those sort of things? The more compatibility we give, the more we are signing up for a lot of work. And we've felt that pain in the past, so it is worth us creeping forward just for our own sanity. I don't know. These trade-offs are just.
We could also release the hard dependency that we made between OS and release. I know that in the past it was a hard constraint, but if it's gonna be good enough to switch release OS's midstream, then we could do it. So if it doesn't break binaries, it's a possibility. It's not inconceivable. And
that requires something like the CentOS dev toolset, which gives us the libc compatibility for newer compilers.
If it's got a newer libc, right? Like in the case of the Ubuntu 14, and if we switch to CentOS 7.6, the libc is going backwards, so that should be okay, right?
Yeah, but the glibc people have made sure that the dev toolset is backwards and forwards compatible. So in that
but that assumes that we're doing it on CentOS for the particular platform.
So in that sense, it's a better release platform.
If we went to CentOS 8, I think then we'd have to convince ourselves it's not going to cause problems, right?
That's doing it midstream. Like we've worked so hard to build trust in LTS.
I'm not proposing we do that generally. So
but Raphael is. But you're right that technically everything we know, it should be okay. But the tragedy of having a release go out that people can't run is pretty big on this, particularly as it gets older in LTS. It's not like we've done balked releases in the past though. Like we have had releases that are bad, and then we've had to backtrack. So we could do that. It's just that trust level in LTS is such a huge commodity for Node.
I'm just saying, here we are, we're 3 people, and we're holding ourselves to a higher standard than everybody else in the process. There were bulk releases that didn't come because of build, etc. And I'm not saying that we should go crazy.
Yeah.
Saying that especially that Ubuntu 14 it's gonna be a pain. It's gonna be a pain.
Yeah, well, then Michael's just putting down what it is currently. But
Yeah.
back to that
Yeah,
point, Michael, of Ubuntu
But,
14. I mean, that ends.
but
Ubuntu 14
there
officially
are no
ends
guarantees
support.
that you'll have CentOS 6 within a month.
Well, that's why I've got it that way. That yes, I'm not confident we'll get I'll be able to get the CentOS 7.6 for the launch of 12. I guess being an IBM platform, I'd say, well, we'll take part of the black eye, right? If the switch over to CentOS 7.6 doesn't go well,
I'm completely comfortable letting you own that.
Yeah, during the current release, we'd plan to hopefully get it before it actually goes LTS as well. And yeah, that's kind of my thinking before that one is, it's not ideal, but it's sort of on us to some extent. So. But I'm kind of in agreement that generally we don't want to do that. This is not what I would want to be doing. But and I think for the rest of the CentOS 7s, like that series is basically supported for what will be the life of 12. So if what you've got down there for CentOS 7 with the dev tool set, that's probably going to be good enough for the life cycle of 12, right?
I think so.
Probably.
What
we
GCC?
already have the dev tool set 7, which is available.
What is the GCC we get in 6?
6.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, like I think that min compiler has basically got to be, yeah, like that's effectively what it'll be. What was the min version going to be?
I'm going to change this up.
Oh, min GCC.
I was actually thinking OS.
Yeah.
But instead I'll move that there. And there's a Wikipedia page that I absolutely love for glib that has all of the versions in it. There's a table that's hidden by default. But if you go to, let me stick this in because it's just, I just love this. It's one of my favorite pages on the internet. Sounds really pathetic. There, if you go to that link there and scroll down halfway to the version history, you'll see
it's hidden.
there's a table.
All right, where did you paste that, in the chat or?
Into the chat, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, so scroll down to version history.
Okay, here I'll go back to sharing it then.
How much are we affected? Like, let's say the
expand that table. It's show, where it says show.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And then on the right hand side, you'll see the distro version. So, if Rel 7, for instance, is on GCC 2.17. So that's quite old. And so if we're compiling binaries with CentOS 7, we're getting that much GCC.
Yeah. Yep. You're getting that level of support, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but on what I want to say, like our main surface contact area, which glibc, is libuv, which is gonna stay, backwards compatible / forward polyfill for a long while. If we're not bumping, if Node doesn't go to libuv 2, then it doesn't really matter.
And I think like the RHELs and CentOS 7s are still supported for a while, right? So there's no push to move up on
7
that
is fine. Yeah. So as long as we can get dev toolset for the platform we care about, which is going to be your problem.
Well, yeah. Platform. So I mean, it does sound like later versions of the dev toolset may be available on CentOS for power and for S390X. Unfortunately, it may be higher than 6. So to start with, we may, start with what we've done already, which is to get the compilers, build the compilers GCC 6 separately. And it's not getting any worse than it has been for existing versions. We may actually be able to make it better as we go forward and start using the dev tool set, but that may actually have to wait till post 12. And I'm still trying to get details on that. I found one blog post which basically said DevToolset 8 was out and it supported, 390 PowerPC. I'm talking to Dan to see if I can find out where and how I get those. But for 12, my plan is just to say we're going to continue to do what we're doing, which was like we installed the 494, which wasn't the default compiler, and we'll do the same thing for 6 on the IBM platforms to start. And then hopefully for the next release, if we can get the dev tool set, I'd hope that we could move up to those.
Okay, so Linux ARM64, we are currently at the level that we're talking about bringing x64 to. So we're currently compiling that on CentOS 7 DevToolset 6. So we leave that one and we're bringing x64 up to that for releases.
Yep.
Now, okay, so back to that other conversation. We're saying min compiler, we're not even going to test GCC4, we're going to just drop it on all the other platforms where we can't get GCC?
I think if we test it, that means that, it can't be broken by, it can't be, the whole reason that we're being pushed to move to 6 is because there's going to be use of features that won't compile on 4. So
are we willing to make that cut now? You can't compile Node on your system if you don't have GCC 6 at a minimum.
For 12 and above, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what the push is, right?
I think it could be downgraded to experimental. If so, that's like what I'm seeing. The scenario is V8 is introducing new code right now, which we will want to have in Node 12, and so either we shim it to compile on 4.9, or we leave it as an exercise to the reader. And I'm from my impression of the ecosystem, I think GCC 6 is fairly available for everyone who's willing to do
it's not Debbie and Jesse. It is a nightmare.
Yeah, except for Debian.
And let's not lose sight of the fact that Debian is used as the base of other distros as well. So it is important for many reasons. But having been there, having to administer Jesse systems and watch that support slip slowly away, this is a problem for more than just Node. It's a mess. So if you're running Debian Jesse now, I bet you're already feeling the pressure to upgrade. You probably have been for a long time.
Yeah,
it's just hard to get a newer compiler. Is that the problem?
It's really hard to compile. You can't get it from anywhere else. Like there's no.
Right, you have to build it yourself.
You have to build it, but then you have to. Yeah, if you want to build it properly for Jesse, you have to backport some of the patches that they applied for Stretch. But anyway, it's just a nightmare. That's the big blind spot I see for going to 6 is Debian Jesse. I think that what is it? Is it 1604? It's not hard to get on, is it? What would be 1604? I think you get that from the tool set things.
Yeah, I mean, we've looked for 1404. You can get 6 from the test PPA.
Ubuntu toolchain r/test.
Right.
Yeah.
So that we've actually gotten it, we've tested it, we believe that for PowerPC LE it's there and we can get it. I'd assume it's at least that good or better on x86, right?
Yes, it is. So you can get 6, 7, 8 from the
right
Ubuntu toolchain PPA.
Does the Ubuntu debs work on Debian?
No, they don't.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I assumed. Yeah.
It's too bad.
They're Ubuntu and Ubuntu related systems. I think, yeah. And this is another reason why we've gone to all our ARM systems are now running Debian Stretch, and we use Docker to go backwards, because staying on Jessie, it's just not tenable at all for so many reasons.
I mean, I guess ARM does sound like it's going to be problematic, though, because the comment in the ARM 6 was that the cross compilers don't even support, wasn't it? Yeah, that the cross compilers don't support targeting ARMs. The newer cross compilers don't support targeting ARM 6 anymore. So getting like a GCC 6 that targeted ARM 6 might be hard. At least that's what I sort of thought I understood from the comment.
I'm not that sure.
I did a toolchain for Raspbian with GCC 6.
Okay.
And I deployed it to our systems, but we're not using it.
Okay.
So
that wouldn't be a problem then. So that's good to know.
Yeah, at least the ARM are supporting that. They're still selling ARM 6 licenses.
They're not supporting ARM 6 very heavily. They're desperate for everyone to move to ARM 64 because they want to sell servers. But so they're actually not investing that much in ARM 6 at all.
Yeah, but they are selling licenses for ARM 6 instruction sets for other people to build.
Yeah, so I've got a cross tool chain for GCC 6.3.1. That was the last one I did, but that again was only for Debian 9 onwards, so Debian Stretch. Which I haven't tested it, but we could probably switch to that for our ARM v7 and v6 builds. If we're going to drop Debian 8, that would be, but that needs experimentation. So let's. We just don't have that in our infra at the moment.
I have been hearing from Microsoft people, because Microsoft is pushing for ARM support, that they have been working really hard on emulators. They are comfortable running their most of their development and testing operations on emulators. That's an interesting,
yeah, that would be interesting to consider for our purposes.
And that's also, the rubric we're missing. What's going to happen with Windows on ARM? Microsoft's people who are involved really want official support for Node on Windows on
That was really close last time I engaged with those folks. There was just a couple of instructions that didn't work properly, but they were getting there.
So they have a dedicated team that works on porting. And they're in contact with Jenny and with me. But I really want them to give us some hardware to test on.
Yeah, I was gonna say we'd need stuff in the CI and.
Yeah, so so they have been saying emulate, but I really want to hear from them, like to get some hardware to run real tests before we really consider that.
Are they, I mean, if they said emulate, that's maybe okay if they provide hardware to run the emulation on, right?
Yeah, and expand our budget on Azure. I don't think that's gonna be a big problem.
Right, expand the budget, get people to help configure them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, it's like we are a little bit behind on Windows. So Microsoft has moved into this kind of evergreen approach to Windows Server. Like they're doing releases similar to Ubuntu, like 2 releases per year. And like every 4th release is gonna be LTS, but they are pushing people to upgrade to like the mid-cycle releases, and we have none of those. Like we have our latest is 2018, which is already like 3 releases behind the latest. And we have, like we've been relying on Jenny and Joao to keep us up to date, but we're not up to date with Windows.
But
they're being run by Microsoft.
Yeah,
so
I know.
I would assume if Microsoft had different aims here, then that would translate.
You know, Microsoft is a huge company. I don't know.
Look, let's leave that one. I'm comfortable. And if you want to fill in some ideas here in the Windows ones, Raphael, you go ahead and do that, and we'll pass it by them and say, are you comfortable with what we've selected here? Because keep in mind also that they do the majority of the work on the Windows stuff. They almost all of it, because
right, it would be.
And I'm glad that we have that.
Yeah, it would have to be, here's what we think is right. Do you agree? And if you do, make it so, right?
So I'm not sure that that's that's the priority they're getting. Like specifically, I'm talking about Jenny. I'm not sure that that's the priority they are getting from Microsoft. We've been taking them, you know, at some level for granted, and Microsoft has given them other priorities to focus on, and as a consequence, we've gone down in their priority, and we need to push that back a little bit, push back up, you know, not to Jenny, push it back to Microsoft and tell them, give us back our resources. But we want to be cutting edge. Don't take away our support.
Do you feel like lead is being taken away?
Again, we're live, but yeah, I know that Janae has been getting a lot of work, and as a result, we're not at their top priority.
And in what way are we suffering from that? What is the outcome of that we're feeling? If you can identify that, I'm more than happy to help push on them. But from my perspective,
for instance, we're not testing on the latest OS. We're not testing on the latest compiler, which is going to be released in April, and we haven't. There's like previews running for a year, and we haven't tested them. But I have, but not Node officially.
So
we are carrying like a ton of, I don't want to say like super legacy platform like VS 2013 and Windows 7, which is like really far on the usage statistics. In that sense.
So we're doing VS 2017 currently with Node 10 and above. That's all we're doing, isn't it? That's what I can see.
Yeah. For building, we test with for 15 for add-ons.
Oh, do we?
Yeah.
Greater than or equal to 10. It says 15 excluded.
For compilation, we don't use the matrix for testing. For testing, there's like a horrible
I see.
if sentence in the job.
That's because Windows testing is different than the rest of the testing?
Because it's split. We compile in one job and we test in a
right, versus all the other ones where we just have them in one. It would have been excluded completely. Yeah.
Yeah, and like the matrix, not exactly the matrix, but the condition for what we test with what is like this 1K character if sentence in the job.
And for release, we're doing VS 2017 as well for both.
Yeah.
So okay. So the scope of your critique here is that we are testing too old, and we should bring that up.
We're testing too old, and we're not getting.
And we should be using.
There's no real push for. There's no real push for, like, eliminating this thing.
Okay, let's. So I'm going to take a couple of to-dos from this, and one of them is let's start an email conversation with Joao, and because he might have instructions or good reasoning that we haven't thought of. The email with Joao and Rafael.
Yeah, makes sense.
And Michael. Yeah. Okay. And then the other to do is that I've already collected here is GCC 6 on Debian 9 for ARM v7 at 6. And we'll come back to ARM in a minute, I think, because there is some more about that. But
yeah. Also, okay. I was just thinking, if we don't have, like, if we don't have it right now, it's going to be sort of a very minor. So it doesn't really matter how we start it now.
What do you mean by that?
Windows. I'm sorry, Windows and all.
Windows. Okay. To be honest with Windows, I just find it too complicated, and I'm just happy to delegate that.
Well, I think it's and for me, it's what if the people, the people from Microsoft should be able to best comment on, well, at least what they think is important, right? because like Rod said, they do a lot of the work, and I can't see us substituting and replacing that work if we think something different is important, right?
Unless you're volunteering, Raphael.
You know,
maybe there's work for
I
you.
am sort of volunteering de facto.
I know you've got a lot more interest in Windows than pretty much anyone else other than Joao.
Yeah, it's a really big problem. It's a big problem. It's a problem that if there was a possibility, I would push up to the foundation, because Windows usage for tooling and for development outside of the US, it's 80-90%, and the US is very chauvinistic against whatever. Well, never mind, that's political. But I'm saying Windows support and focus should be way higher. And I know Microsoft is a member and they're contributing support, but we shouldn't just leave it to them and assume that they know best for the
no, right, and I wouldn't criticize them either, because they rely on signals coming up from from us and from Janae.
Yeah, I'm not saying that it's their fault. Like, I'm saying that they're so big that we need to coordinate. We need to be like their project manager. We need to tell them like what we're missing. I'm sure that they'll be, very accommodating. All the people that I've talked with are very happy to help, etc. We, like the Node project, hasn't been pushing enough to get those things. And I'm going to say entitled, and we're entitled to them because it's a huge thing, although less in production, but definitely in development and usage. It's a huge thing worldwide.
So I mean, I'd agree with that. So it sounds like if you have the cycles to sort of work with them to suggest what we should do, then you're hopeful that that'll also happen. So
yeah,
it sounds like we're all agreed that the next step is that you can kind of push on that and say, here's what you propose should be done for 12, and
yeah, I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah,
it's like we need to be we the Node project need to be aware of that. It's a kind of a low-hanging fruit that we can pick.
So we are 5 minutes past
okay.
7 for me anyway. Just wondering if we can loop back to see if we get closure on the table here. And I guess ARM was one of the things we still needed to talk a bit about, right?
Yes, I'm also, I put in SmartOS there. I bumped it up to 18. We don't test on 18, but we have historically bumped pretty rapidly on our release builds. We have a lot of different versions of SmartOS for that reason in our infra.
Yeah.
But the problem is they do treat them as LTS. It's just, it's been annoying to have to support older versions of SmartOS for long periods of time. So I just created an instance to see if I could figure out what the compile level was on there. But
okay.
Anyone see any reason why we shouldn't just? We can pass this on to Colin.
Yeah, I would just say if you think, like, because I do see in the CI we have 15, 16, 17, so it does seem like each release it gets bumped up, and that's been what they think is the right thing. So I think just proposing this and get Colin to say yay or nay makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Do we do SmartOS on 32-bit?
No, we dropped that to experimental. Although I did see something. I saw the compile the other day do something weird, like it was compiling 32-bit as well. But I looked at a downloads directory and it's only 64-bit for latest 11. It's SunOS 64. That's it. So no, I think we just ignore 32-bit for now. Yeah, so you can get GCC 6 on and 7 and 8 on SmartOS 18. So that's good.
Okay. Yeah, I thought I saw in the comments it was only up to 7, but that might have been on an earlier version.
Oh, I see.
It even says 4.9 in there. So wow.
In 18?
Yeah.
Oh. Maybe there's like, GCC, like a package named GCC 6, like in Ubuntu. I need to figure that out. I see you put Windows on 32-bit experimental.
That wasn't intentional.
No, we're running it like it's. I'm saying it's tier 1 because it's free. Like it's free to cross compile and it's free to. Oh, there is something that's experimental and that's native compile. Windows 32-bit native compile doesn't work right now.
So is it?
So it's fully supported to run, but building only cross compile. But it's not really.
That would be our last 32-bit, right?
Right.
I mean, I'm just wondering, like Windows 32-bit, we still need to retain that in 12?
So supporting the binary is cheap. It's free because every system is side by side, and there is hardware that's for some reason drivers, etc., that runs in 32-bit. The only caveat we have with Windows is you can't build it on a native 32-bit machine. You can only cross-compile it. Because maybe with a new compiler, there are bugs in the compiler.
Right, but I don't know that we want to maintain. Do we have? I guess we have 32-bit Windows machines as well still in the farm.
That's a really interesting question. So we test them. We build a cross-compiled binary, and we test it with cross-compiler for the native binary. I don't think we actually have 32-bit hardware. Like our 32-bit guarantee is derived from Microsoft's guarantee that if you test it on the mini kernel that's the shim layer, it's gonna work on the hardware because it's the same thing.
Okay, I guess I'm more at like, there is a cost to continue to build it there. We dropped it for Linux. So it's just validating that, and Windows would be the only one you can get a 32-bit binary. So does that still make sense? Was my main question.
So I'm ambivalent. On the one hand, I want to say I don't care. On the other hand, if we keep the level of support we do right now, which is a pure 64 machines hardware, we just test it as if it's 32-bit. And that's the guarantee that we do. That's what we've been doing for 8 and for 10. So it's fairly cheap.
It's still more binaries and more builds.
Yes.
So it's not free.
It's not free. I'm just saying it's cheap. It's fairly cheap. In terms of maintenance for us, for the build group, it's pretty cheap. I'm not saying it's free.
So yeah, I have no strong strong push one way or the other. Just this is the time to ask the question. That's all.
And as I said, I'm a little different about that.
So maybe that's something to ask as well. When
we should
to say we should do these newer things, ask about, well, do we need to retain this other?
Yes, that's a great question to push to ask someone.
Trying to get the libc version of SmartOS. I can't. Oh, I hate this operating system. Okay, I'm going to ignore that.
Okay, so and is it like so?
Oh, FreeBSD. Let's do something with FreeBSD because, FreeBSD support is annoying when it runs okay. We can ignore it, but should be bumped to 12. 12 is out. But we don't have any 12 in us. You know.
Who's champion for this?
It was, good question. It was Johan. And maybe without a champion, we pull FreeBSD and leave it in experimental.
That's like at least make like a request for comments, or like request for participants, somebody to come and help, because it's like we don't have an active FreeBSD community members, and
well, look, we can start with experimental, and if someone wants to pull it out of experimental, that's fine.
Yep. I think that's totally fair, that like we should basically say it, this is, and the proposal is because we don't have an active, if somebody wants to step up to keep it at a higher tier, let us know.
Yeah, for instance, I keep messing them up, but like NetBSD, they're running a parallel community, and they're having fun, and they're very happy with it without like official support.
Okay, macOS. What are we doing now? What are we proposing? Are we doing?
The building says greater than 10.11 is the version support. I guess like the compilers go back to whatever. I think we still may have them. I don't know if we ever moved. Well, maybe we did move it up from 10.8 to 10.11. I'm not sure if we did that even.
We compile on 10.11 with the 10.7 flag.
Right.
I thought we did go back to 10.8.
I think we're limited again by libuv. I'm not sure, but I think so.
I mean, ideally, we'd move up to 10 to OS X 13 or something, although we'd have to get machines in place to do that, I think. Well, we would. So
we have 13. We don't have 14?
I think when George last looked, 14 wasn't on
Max Stadium.
Yeah, now it may be now, but it just would, it'd be one more thing we'd have to get done in the next month.
Sorry, we don't have what was that?
I think we have OS X 13, but not 14 machines, it sounds like, from Raphael's recollection.
From what I see in the inventory, we only have 12.
Or 12. That's what would have been my guess, was that actually, we did it up to 12.
We have 12. We wanted to do 13.
Yeah.
No, we can't do 14. That's why we wanted the minis.
Yeah. We should be able to get to 14 on Max Stadium. I suspect it's just a matter of time or getting the images or what. The minis were just for more to have diversity.
Yeah. So as far as I remember, it's not a trivial issue by Max Stadium. Apple is pushing back on VMware. It's
I think there were 13. I thought there was already 13 images on Mac Stadium. It was
yeah, there are 13. Sorry, 13. 13. There are no 14. Mac Stadium runs 14 on hardware. The VMware can't virtualize 14.
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't know. With George moving on, I'm not sure who we're going to get to set up new Mac instances between now and April. You know, and I don't know. I think, well, I guess it's like how much of a priority would it be versus all the other stuff that we need to get up? Like if we moved our building up to 12, which we already have, is that going to be a disaster versus trying to push for 13? And it sounds like 14 is just not worth the effort yet right now anyway.
I don't have
macOS deployment target 10.7. You're right. So, I mean, I don't know if we can know any compelling reason to bump this. Maybe this is a question for the V8 team, and maybe Ali would be able to answer this for us. If we left it as 10.11 with deployment target 10.7, is that going to cause any problems for them?
What we have encountered is that Apple, they don't backport their compilers and Xcode environments.
Oh, we had that problem with LibUV recently, wasn't there? Where there was something in the header that was missing.
Yeah, so that's like, so that's a bit of a problem. That those are essentially their end-of-life platforms.
So you're saying when we target 10.7, it causes problem, or is it that because we're building on 10.11?
That we're building, that we're using like a new version of Xcode and the Xcode build toolset, and that's what we do. V8. Again, they compile their own Clang.
Yeah.
So we're having problems that Apple doesn't want to fix because they're saying you're using like a ridiculous old Xcode or like an old Xcode on a new Xcode on an old OS.
So this is a quick thing I'd like to post in GitHub and pull in V8, probably Ali specifically, and LibUV, probably Ben particularly, to help sort that one out. I just don't think we can answer that here. It'd be nice to bump it up further, but what are our options? We could go to 10.12.
10.12 is, I think, easy because we already have those machines in the farms. 10.13, I think we have images in Mac Stadium. We just have to provision them and configure them and, just find the time to actually do them. 14, it sounds like from what Rifak is saying, there's just a fundamental issue that needs to be solved before it'd be virtualizable.
Yeah. So if we want to target 14, we need hardware. We need like realware.
Right. Now, I'm hoping that isn't a forever statement, is it?
I have no idea, but like it's a thing.
Right. I guess I'd be tempted to stick at 13 unless there was something that was driving us, because it's awfully nice to have the Mac Stadium, to use the Mac Stadium machines, to be honest.
So 10.13, you'd like to get to 10.13?
Well, I mean, if we're going to move up, I'd stop at 10.13 just because that's where Mac Stadium.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I've said here that 10.12 would be doable. 10.13 is a little bit trickier, and 10.14 is not practical. So that's the note we need to leave.
Yeah, I think 10.13 is just it's work, and we need to find time or people to do the work. That's the tricky part.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's do. Okay. So let's move on from Mac OS. Cool, you've left a note in there. Windows, we're going to email with Janae. So let's go to ARM.
Yeah.
So I think we can, locking in Debian 9 is going to be sensible for ARM v7. I don't think there's any problem with that. ARM v6 goes back to that discussion on GitHub. And as we're discovering, it's, Pi Zero is a good idea, but very non-trivial to set up a cluster of them to do the testing. And I haven't responded to Brian's question there about failure. Do they track the failures on ARM v6 track failures on ARM v7? But my response would be yes. The main failures we get on ARM is to do with resource constraints. And I can't remember the last time we had an ARM failure that was ARM specific, or particularly ARM v6 specific.
Right.
So I would say moving it to experimental is very unlikely to cause too many problems for ARM v6 users, and the only thing is providing binaries for them.
Right, because it's hard to build.
Yeah,
I don't think the Pi Zeros, I don't think can even do it, to be honest.
Yeah, but we're cross-compiling. We're just testing.
Yes, no, but the point is that, so the question here is, do we just drop them for Node 12, but find a way to provide them with binaries? Seems to me that would keep the community happy, and that would be the best compromise between our needs and their needs. Our needs of maintenance, and then the cost.
Yeah, so there is emulation, which again is a constraint of resources. If somebody is willing to come in and set up a good emulator, that will be a huge help for us.
So my proposal would be, for now, let's put ARM v6 as experimental for Node 12 and commit ourselves to finding a way to get them binaries.
Okay.
And I don't think that that commitment has to be, we're going to provide you with Node 12.0.0 binaries on the day it comes out. But I think working towards a channel for these non-standard binaries, and I mentioned things like well, you're interested in x86, Raphael.
Yeah, exactly.
And x64 with Musel would be a huge boon for the Alpine people if we can provide binaries for that through some other channel. Because I have been, and I think others have been resistant to providing them through the official channels because of just this proliferation of official binaries we have to support. And if something breaks or something doesn't work for release, then everyone's got to be all hands on deck. If we had an alternative channel where the burden of support was lower, so if something didn't work for a release and somebody didn't show up for a day to fix it, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I'm very much like, that's an idea I'm hugely supportive of.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
so
I'd also
partially supported binaries. Like, we do the hard work, but we don't give you the amazing support guarantee.
of
the Node.js
which is what experimental is supposed to be.
It's like we'll take changes.
We'll also build the binaries, but they'll be with an asterisk.
Yes, exactly. Binaries with an asterisk, and we're not going to put them in the same place, because putting them in the same place as all the rest implies things.
We will figure out where, but we'll put them in a place that is inaccessible.
There may be scope for even getting NVM to support some unofficial channel. I'm sure we could probably convince Jordan to consider adding in a special channel for certain platforms. But regardless, if they can download a binary onto their Pi Zeros from someplace, I think they'd be happy.
And it will work. We can give them like 2 nines guarantee instead of 3 nines guarantee.
Well, I mean, I wonder, we're even going so far as like putting a place people could upload binaries that they built, although I guess you want some trust in that.
Well, maybe. So what I was imagining is a GitHub repo, maybe not even in the Node.js org, possibly not, that people could contribute scripts, maybe Docker containers, things that can be triggered. And maybe the Node.js org could provide some infrastructure. But because we could do a lot of these things in Docker containers. Like you can spin up a Docker container, grab cross-compile tool chains, and compile ARMv6 binaries in a Docker container. Same with Musel, all these other things. We could do a lot of these things in Docker. So you could have a repo that contains all of that and some basic scripting that, tests for new releases and then triggers these things on some infrastructure. We could have one server doing all of these things, sequentially. Yep. And they just because there's no hurry. And so the burden of having hardware is lower unless you want to come in with something like FreeBSD or NetBSD or something else. If you want to show up with that, then maybe somebody shows up and we establish a relationship. Or I got to be careful.
Or set up like QEMU. Give us a script. Give us a Docker with QEMU inside.
Sure. Yeah. And yeah, but if it's unofficial, then also the security burden is lower. So we can the Node.js org can put disclaimers saying we are not officially related to this project. This is done by some of our members and others. If you want to trust these binaries, then it's up to you. And we can put a big disclaimer on on whatever page we have for these downloads that this is. And I've seen that at plenty of places. Like you go to repos for all sorts of things. People say contributed binaries. Trust them if you want.
Yeah. And I guess the real difference would be that one of the big differences also would be like it wouldn't be tested for every pull request. So if something snuck in that was ARM6 specific, it might break. One of these things would eventually somebody discover it, but that could take a few weeks to resolve. But whatever, right?
Yeah, and collaborators would be welcome to go into an issue that says, I didn't get a binary for this version, to say, look, they're not officially supported. If you want to make it work again, you can put in the work or find someone who can. That should be okay. So I'm going to put another to-do, which is to open a new issue with some rough proposal around that.
And I think that's actually, for the usage of that was raised with the Pi zeros, a lot of it probably doesn't need the security release the next day, right?
No.
So that may be a really good approach to doing that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like even in these last security releases, the binaries were delayed by a day anyway. So, yeah, these are not critical systems, but you can imagine people contributing, a Docker container to build Node against LibreSSL.
Sure.
You can offer binaries for that, and that'd be pretty cool. But people could go to this place and get quirky binaries without SSL, low memory.
Although I'd almost like that to be a separate org/place/ maybe we'd contribute hardware, but not necessarily, commit to.
No, that's right. We would need to find a way for this to be arm's length.
Yeah.
So if this thing has problems like trust or security or even time problems, we don't want to have to take responsibility for it.
Right.
And we would prefer a community to develop around it. So all these ARMv6 people that showed up in that issue.
Yeah.
If that can be the community that rallies around those ARMv6 binaries and maintains them, great. Like there will be a time when the toolchain that we're using doesn't work anymore and somebody needs to fix it. Who's going to do that? Is that going to be me again, or is it's one of these people?
Yeah, it's a little bit like what's happening with the Docker images, a little bit. Yeah, it's a thriving repo, and they're not officially built, but they're getting things done.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're well. Anyway, let's not get into that. I mean, they're up officially on Docker and everything, but we support it, but don't have to do all the work.
Yeah. Well, and here's one thing that I didn't realize until this last release is they're still supporting x86 binaries.
Right. I think that's just a matter of omission, if anything else. But
they forgot to turn it off.
Well, I think nobody told them to.
which points to how arm's length they are. It really is a separate. So, okay, I'll try and formulate something to go up on GitHub on that, and then I'll draw people's attention to it. And for now, we're going to say ARMv6 is experimental, so we can start phasing out support in our cluster. But with the caveat that might change. There might be maybe we'll come up with an emulation solution or some magical NFS Pi 0 cluster thing that cuts our build time in half, and we change it to tier 2 again. But for now, going out of the gate, let's say it's experimental.
Yeah, I mean, and encourage that group to come up with, like, if there's enough people that come together to say, let's come up with a build option that may be less frequent and whatever that makes sense, then that sounds good. I think the build option, though, will need to be, like, the Pi Zeros don't help because they just don't have enough memory, I don't think.
No, it has to be cross-compiled.
So it has to be cross-compiled, yeah.
Testing is our critical problem.
Yeah.
And if we can't test, then we can't release official binaries.
Yeah, right.
So it's going to be experimental with an asterisk.
Yes.
Experimental, but we're working on it. Okay.
But that goes the same for the rest. It's like FreeBSD. That's experimental with an asterisk.
Yeah.
If somebody steps up to make
for
it
a champion for community resources.
Yeah. It's kind of like if somebody steps up to make it more than experimental, then we'll support that, right? But
yeah.
So I think with this unofficial binaries thing, maybe we start off by saying the build team will sponsor this effort with a server from amongst our infrastructure, a single server to run scripts and stuff.
Happily, although again, like we could get the Internet Archive are willing to donate some hardware for that, and
right.
I think the most important is knowledge. We are willing to support it with knowledge.
Right. I would hope. See, if we can strain it enough and hold it at arm's length, I would hope that others show up. So you might get somebody showing up with Solaris machines and saying, "Look, we're a company that does Solaris. We'd like to have binaries, but we've got machines." Because one of the problems we have now is that all of our energies and all of our sponsorship is focused on these official type platforms, and we don't have room for these others to come and contribute. So if we can try and establish a separate community that has its own resources and even its own governance, that the people establishing levels of security, that sort of stuff. Like let them.
It is happening for MIPS. Like there is a community that they're building, they're patching, they're releasing binaries for MIPS, and they have nothing to do with us. Like
is that even going to continue with V8 dropping?
Yeah. So V8 has found a new sponsor, I think.
They have? Okay.
I think so. I think I read something about it. But the MIPS people are willing to try and continue to maintain V8 for as long as they can.
There's a lot of activity happening in RISC-V right now. Perhaps we'd see a RISC-V movement for Node. I don't know if that's even possible with V8, but that'd be cool to see that emerge. And if we could help foster that by having a space dedicated to these quirky things, that'd be great. Anyway, I'll formulate an issue for that. Okay. We can have that discussion here.
Yeah, sounds good.
Is there anything outstanding here, or are we happy to put this in a form where we can propose it for further discussion with the TSC and others?
I think
Windows needs to be resolved, but
yeah, I think this looks good to get into an issue, and yeah, maybe it needs to have Windows put in and then go to the TSC, or maybe.
Yeah, you're right. So I'll put in all the dates for Node 12 at the top of it, so it's obvious. Oops. Where'd that go? Okay. So I think I've got my to-dos, which are emails about Windows. We need to test GCC 6 for ARMv7. We need to go fishing for expertise on the Mac OS questions. So I'll open an issue for that and try and pull in at least Ben and Ali.
Yep. And
get them to pull in anyone else. And then an issue about this unofficial binaries project.
Yep. And I've got work to get the GCC 6s onto the IBM platforms.
And I'll try to get GCC 6 everywhere else, side by side.
Yeah. Do we have a lack of Debian 9? I have a feeling that we may not have much Debian 9. I've got plenty of Debian 9 on ARM.
I see too.
Oh yeah, we've got a soft layer and a DigitalOcean Debian 9. Okay, that's fine. And I'll SmartOS as well, and I should put a to-do in there that I'll highlight that for
Colin, yeah.
Colin. Okay, cool. This is good.
Okay, so maybe next time we can reserve our meeting for focusing on pulling in the permission levels.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, if that's it, I'll stop the stream.
Thanks, Michael.
Stop. Yeah, thanks.
And thanks, Raphael.
Yeah, thanks.